The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Zara James frantically urged her exhausted mare up the narrow canyon path, the distant sound of hoofbeats growing louder behind her. Blood trickled from a gash on her forearm, and her honey-blonde hair had come loose from its pins, whipping wildly around her dust-streaked face as she fled the men who had ambushed the stagecoach just miles back. "Come on, Penny," she pleaded with the horse, her throat parched from dust and fear. "Just a little farther." The year was 1878, and at 22, Zara was discovering that her journey west to claim her late uncle's general store in Silveridge had been a fool's errand. The stagecoach driver and the other 2 passengers lay dead several miles behind her, and she had only managed to escape by pure luck when her horse had spooked and bolted during the initial gunfire. The canyon walls rose steeply on either side, painted in stripes of ochre and rust, beautiful in their way but now serving as the perfect trap. The path ahead narrowed further, and Zara's heart sank as she rounded a bend to find a wall of boulders blocking her escape. A rockslide had sealed her fate. "Well, well, look what we found ourselves, boys," a gravelly voice called out. Zara turned her exhausted mare to face 5 riders who had spread out across the narrow path, effectively cutting off any chance of escape. Their faces were obscured by bandanas, but their eyes held no mercy as they surveyed her. The leader, a tall man with cold blue eyes, moved his horse forward. "Mighty inconvenient, that rockslide," he drawled, gesturing to the boulders. "Seems like you're at the end of your trail, miss." "I have nothing of value," Zara said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "The stagecoach strongbox is back with the coach." The leader laughed, a sound like gravel underfoot. "That ain't entirely true. Pretty thing like you is plenty valuable in these parts." Zara's hand moved subtly toward the small derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt. She had 3 bullets and 5 men faced her. The odds were impossible, but she wouldn't go without a fight. The bandits began to close in, their horses stepping carefully over the rocky terrain. Zara pulled the derringer from its hiding place, but before she could aim, a new sound echoed through the canyon, thundering hoofbeats, different from the measured pace of the bandits. A figure appeared on the ridge above them, silhouetted against the brilliant blue sky. Without hesitation, the rider urged his horse down what appeared to be an impossible slope, sending small avalanches of stones cascading as the magnificent black stallion descended with astonishing agility. "What the hell?" the lead bandit managed before a shot rang out. The mysterious rider fired with precision even as his horse negotiated the treacherous descent. One bandit clutched his shoulder and toppled from his saddle. The newcomer's hat was pulled low, but Zara caught the flash of determined green eyes as he thundered between her and the bandits. "The lady's leaving with me," the stranger announced, his voice deep and steady as he positioned himself protectively in front of Zara. "You boys can ride away now, or you can die here. Your choice." The bandits hesitated, clearly reassessing the situation. The stranger had fired only once, but had hit his mark from a nearly impossible angle while riding down a steep canyon wall. Such skill suggested this was no ordinary traveler. "There's still 4 of us and 1 of you," the leader pointed out, though his confidence had visibly wavered. "Math never was my strong suit," the stranger replied calmly, his Winchester repeating rifle leveled steadily. "But I reckon my odds are just fine." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the leader nodded almost imperceptibly, and 2 of the bandits raised their weapons. The stranger was faster. 2 shots cracked in rapid succession, and 2 more bandits fell. One dead, one clutching his leg and howling in pain. "Still want to test those odds?" the stranger asked the remaining 2. The leader glared with pure hatred but slowly raised his hands. "This ain't over." "For today it is," the stranger replied. Without looking back at Zara, he instructed, "Madam, there's a path around these boulders to the right, narrow but passable. Start making your way through, I'll be right behind you." Zara didn't need to be told twice. She guided her exhausted mare toward the barely visible trail the stranger had indicated. Behind her, she heard him warn the bandits, "You follow us, you die. Simple as that." The path was indeed narrow, barely wide enough for her horse, and hugged the canyon wall with a sheer drop on the other side. Zara's heart hammered as they picked their way carefully around the rockslide. Behind her, she heard the stranger's horse following. Once they had navigated the treacherous passage and put some distance between themselves and the bandits, the stranger pulled alongside her. With the immediate danger past, Zara could now see her rescuer clearly. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps in his late 20s, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and those remarkable green eyes that had caught her attention earlier. His clothing was trail-worn but of good quality, a buckskin jacket over a faded blue shirt, denim pants, and well-used boots. The black Stetson he wore had seen better days, but it suited him. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, his gaze quickly assessing her. "Just a scratch," she replied, indicating the now dried blood on her arm. "Thank you for your timely intervention, Mr. Irwin." "Wade Irwin," he said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "And you are Zara James. I was on the stagecoach to Silveridge when those men attacked. They killed everyone else." Her voice caught as the reality of what she had witnessed threatened to overwhelm her. Wade's expression darkened. "Jackson's gang, they've been hitting stagecoaches and isolated homesteads for months. The territorial marshal has a bounty on them, but they know this country too well." He looked back the way they had come. "We should keep moving. They might circle around once they've tended to their wounded." "Where are we going?" Zara asked, suddenly realizing she was putting her trust in a complete stranger. "My ranch is about 2 hours' ride from here. It's the closest safe place," Wade explained. "Your horse looks dead on her feet." "We'll need to take it slow." As they rode, Wade kept a vigilant eye on their surroundings, occasionally stopping to listen or scan the ridgelines above them. Zara found herself studying him when he wasn't looking. Despite his rugged appearance, there was something refined about Wade Irwin, perhaps in the way he spoke or the careful consideration he gave before answering her questions. "What brings you to these parts, Miss James?" he asked after they had been riding for some time. "My uncle, Henry James, owned the general store in Silveridge. He passed away last month and I've inherited it. I was coming to take possession and decide whether to sell or try to run it myself." She sighed. "All I have left in the world is what's in my saddlebags and the deed to the store in my bodice." Wade nodded thoughtfully. "Henry James was a good man, fair in his dealings. The town felt his loss." "You knew him?" Zara asked, surprised. Everyone in the territory knew Henry. "I buy my supplies from his store. Well, your store now, I suppose." As they traveled, the landscape gradually changed from the steep canyon walls to rolling hills dotted with juniper and piñon pines. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when Wade pointed to a distant cluster of buildings nestled in a valley below. "That's the Double I, not much to look at, but it's home." The ranch was indeed modest but well maintained. A sturdy main house built of logs and local stone sat alongside a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. A corral held several horses that lifted their heads with interest as the riders approached. A stream ran along one side of the property, and beyond it, cattle grazed on the open range. As they rode into the yard, a weathered man with iron-gray hair emerged from the barn, a shotgun held casually but ready. Upon recognizing Wade, he lowered the weapon. "Got company, I see," the older man called out. "This is Miss Zara James, Henry's niece from back east," Wade explained as they dismounted. "Miss James, this is Caleb Tucker, my foreman and the closest thing to family I've got out here." Caleb nodded respectfully to Zara. "Madam, sorry about your uncle, fine gentleman." "Thank you, Mr. Tucker," Zara replied. "Jackson's gang hit the Silveridge stage," Wade continued, taking the reins of both horses. "Miss James was the only survivor. I found her cornered in Dead Man's Canyon." Caleb's expression hardened. "Those vultures still at it then." "Marshal Bryce was through here last week asking if we'd seen any sign of them. They're holed up somewhere to the south, I reckon. 3 of them are nursing wounds now, though," Wade said grimly. "I'll send one of the boys to alert the marshal," Caleb offered. "He's still in Silveridge, far as I know." Wade nodded in agreement, then turned to Zara. Let's get you inside. You look about ready to fall over, and that arm needs tending. The interior of Wade's home was surprisingly comfortable. Simple furnishings of solid craftsmanship filled the main room, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with volumes that spoke of diverse interests from cattle breeding to Shakespeare. A woman in her 50s emerged from what appeared to be the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "This is Mrs. Abigail Porter, our cook and housekeeper," Wade introduced. "Mrs. Porter, Miss Zara James needs some attention to that arm and probably a hot meal." "Land's sake, child, you're half dead on your feet," Mrs. Porter exclaimed, immediately taking charge. "Come along to the kitchen. I've got water heating and we'll see to that wound." While Mrs. Porter cleaned and bandaged her arm, Zara found herself fighting exhaustion. The events of the day had taken their toll, and now that she was safe, the adrenaline that had kept her going was rapidly fading. "You'll stay in the guest room tonight," Mrs. Porter decided. "I'll bring up some stew and biscuits once you've had a chance to freshen up." The guest room was small but comfortable, with a quilted bed, washstand, and small dresser. A window looked out over the valley, offering a view of the sunset painting the landscape in gold and crimson. Zara washed away the dust of the trail as best she could with the basin of warm water Mrs. Porter had provided, then sank gratefully onto the edge of the bed. When Mrs. Porter returned with a tray of food, Zara discovered she was ravenous despite her exhaustion. The hearty beef stew and fresh baked biscuits were perhaps the most delicious things she had ever tasted. "Mr. Irwin says you're Henry James's niece," Mrs. Porter remarked as she bustled about, turning down the bed. "I remember him mentioning a niece back east." "Said you were studying to be a teacher." "I was," Zara confirmed. "I had just completed my training when I received word of Uncle Henry's passing. Well, Silveridge could use a good teacher. The schoolmarm we had left last winter to get married, and they've had temporary arrangements since." Mrs. Porter smiled kindly. "Something to consider, perhaps, if you decide to stay." After Mrs. Porter left, Zara found herself too restless for sleep despite her fatigue. The faces of the stagecoach driver and the other passengers haunted her, people she had spoken with just hours before, now dead. And then there was Wade Irwin, who had appeared like something out of a dime novel to save her. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, Wade stood there, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "I wanted to check if you had everything you needed," he said, "and to let you know that I've sent word to Marshal Bryce about what happened. He should ride out tomorrow." "Thank you," Zara said sincerely, "for everything." "I owe you my life," Wade shook his head. "Anyone would have done the same." "I don't believe that's true," Zara replied. "What you did was extraordinary. You could have been killed." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Well, I'm glad I wasn't. Get some rest, Miss James. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to get you safely to Silveridge." After he left, Zara finally climbed into bed, her mind whirling with the day's events. Despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion claimed her quickly, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The morning brought clarity and renewed determination. Zara awoke to the sound of activity in the ranch yard, men's voices, horses nickering, the distant lowing of cattle. For a moment she was disoriented, but then the events of the previous day came flooding back. She dressed quickly in the same travel-stained clothing she had worn the day before, wishing she had access to her trunk, which had been on the stagecoach. Her other possessions were likely scattered across the desert now, looted by the bandits or carried off by scavengers. When she made her way downstairs, she found Wade at the table with Caleb, both men poring over what appeared to be maps of the surrounding territory. "Good morning," Wade greeted her, standing as she entered. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I expected to," Zara admitted. "Have you heard anything from the marshal?" "Not yet, but one of my men spotted dust on the north trail about half an hour ago. Could be him." Wade gestured to the chair opposite him. "Mrs. Porter's keeping breakfast warm for you." As if summoned by her name, the housekeeper appeared with a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits, which she set before Zara with a motherly smile. "Eat up, child. You've got color in your cheeks this morning, which is a sight better than yesterday's ghost." Zara hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was before her. She ate with enthusiasm while Wade and Caleb resumed their discussion. "If they're using the old mining camp as a hideout, there are only 3 approaches," Caleb was saying, his weathered finger tracing lines on the map. "All easily defended, which is why we need the marshal and a proper posse," Wade replied. "I'm not risking my men on a frontal assault. The territorial governor's offering $1,000 for Jackson, dead or alive," Caleb reminded him. "That would go a long way toward those breeding cattle you've been wanting." Wade shook his head firmly. "We're ranchers, not bounty hunters." Besides, he was interrupted by the sound of horses entering the yard. Both men rose and moved to the window. "That's Bryce, all right," Wade confirmed. "And he's brought company." They went out to meet the arrivals, and Zara followed after hastily finishing her breakfast. Outside, Marshal Bryce, a barrel-chested man with a magnificent mustache, was dismounting alongside 2 deputies and a distinguished-looking gentleman in a city suit that seemed out of place in the rugged surroundings. "Irwin," the marshal greeted Wade with a nod. "Got your message." "This is Judge Hollister from Prescott. He was in Silveridge hearing cases when word came about the stagecoach." The judge, a tall man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. "Mr. Irwin, your reputation precedes you." Wade looked slightly uncomfortable at this remark but shook the offered hand. "Judge, what brings you all the way out here?" "Justice, Mr. Irwin, pure and simple." The judge turned his attention to Zara as she approached, and this must be Miss James. "I am deeply sorry for your ordeal, young lady." "Thank you, Your Honor," Zara replied, somewhat intimidated by the formal address. "Miss James is the only witness to yesterday's attack," Marshal Bryce explained. "Judge Hollister wants to hear her account firsthand." They moved inside to the relative comfort of Wade's sitting room. There, Zara recounted the attack on the stagecoach, her escape, and the subsequent confrontation in the canyon. Wade filled in the details of his arrival and intervention. "You say you wounded 3 of Jackson's men." The marshal asked Wade, 2 for certain. The 3rd might have just been knocked from his horse. Judge Hollister had been taking notes throughout their accounts. Now he looked up with a grim expression. "This is the 4th stagecoach robbery attributed to Jackson's gang in the past 3 months. 12 people dead, including a child." He closed his notebook decisively. "I'm authorizing a special posse with full legal authority to pursue these men beyond the county line if necessary." "With all due respect, Judge," Wade said carefully, "I have a ranch to run and men who depend on me for their livelihood." "I understand your reluctance, Mr. Irwin, but you know this territory better than anyone, and your tracking skills are well known throughout the territory." The judge's tone made it clear this was more than a casual request. "The territorial governor has personally authorized me to offer a substantial reward for the capture of these men." Wade looked torn, his gaze briefly meeting Zara's before returning to the judge. "Give me until tomorrow morning to make arrangements for the ranch. Caleb can handle things for a while, but there are matters I need to settle first." "Very well," Judge Hollister agreed. "The marshal and I will return to Silveridge today. We'll expect you tomorrow to lead the posse." After the officials departed, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Zara could see the conflict on Wade's face, a man pulled between his responsibilities and a sense of justice. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. Wade looked up, seemingly surprised by her comment. "Don't I? Those men killed innocent people. They would have killed you too, or worse. But it's not your fight. In this territory, we all have to stand for something, Miss James." Wade's expression was resolute. "If good men do nothing, men like Jackson win." There was something in his tone that suggested a deeper story, but Zara didn't press. Instead, she asked, "Will you escort me to Silveridge before you join the posse? I should see to my uncle's affairs." Wade nodded. "We'll leave this afternoon." "It's only a few hours' ride, and you'll be safer in town while this business with Jackson is resolved." As Wade went to make preparations, Zara wandered onto the front porch, taking in the vista of the ranch. It was a beautiful place, wild yet orderly in its way. She could understand why a man would fight to protect such a home. Mrs. Porter joined her, carrying a bundle of clothing. "These might fit you better than those travel clothes, dear. They belong to Wade's sister, Emma. She left them behind when she moved to San Francisco with her husband." "Oh, I couldn't possibly," Zara began. "Nonsense. They've been sitting in a trunk gathering dust. Emma would be pleased they're being put to use." Mrs. Porter pressed the bundle into Zara's hands. "Besides, you can't go riding into town looking like you've been dragged behind a wild horse." The clothes, a practical riding skirt of dark blue, a cream-colored blouse, and a fitted jacket fit reasonably well. Emma had been slightly taller than Zara, but Mrs. Porter made quick adjustments with pins and needle where necessary. By early afternoon, Wade had completed his preparations for departure. He had changed into fresh clothing as well and strapped on a gun belt with a well-worn Colt revolver. His Winchester rifle rested in a scabbard attached to his saddle. "Your mare's still pretty worn out," he told Zara as they prepared to leave. "I've saddled Daisy for you instead. She's gentle but sure-footed." The mare in question was a dappled gray with intelligent eyes that regarded Zara with interest. Wade helped her mount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her, which she quickly dismissed as gratitude for his continuing assistance. They rode out with Caleb's assurances that he would manage the ranch affairs in Wade's absence. The foreman seemed concerned about his employer's involvement with the posse, but didn't voice any objections. As they traveled, the landscape gradually transitioned from the open rangeland of Wade's property to more rugged terrain. Wade kept them moving at a steady pace but remained vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Tell me about Silveridge," Zara requested after they had been riding for some time. "I've only read Uncle Henry's letters, and he wasn't one for detailed descriptions." Wade considered the question. "It's a mining town that's trying to become something more. Silver strike about 15 years ago brought the first wave of settlers, but the easy ore played out quickly. Now it's mostly ranchers, merchants, and a few stubborn miners who believe there's still a big strike waiting to be found." "And is there?" Zara asked. Wade shrugged. "Maybe the mountains around here keep their secrets well." He glanced at her with curiosity. "What about you?" "Henry mentioned you were studying to be a teacher." "Yes, at the Kensington Female Seminary in Philadelphia. I completed my training just before Uncle Henry's letter arrived informing me of my inheritance." Zara sighed. "My parents died when I was 16, and Uncle Henry paid for my education. I never expected to inherit his business. Do you plan to sell it?" "That was my intention," Zara admitted, "but now I'm not so certain. Mrs. Porter mentioned that Silveridge needs a teacher." Wade nodded. "The school's been making do with temporary arrangements since Miss Collins left. The town council would likely be pleased to have a properly trained teacher." They continued their journey, with Wade pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the territory. Despite the circumstances that had brought them together, Zara found herself enjoying his company. Wade Irwin was not a talkative man, but when he did speak, his words carried weight and consideration. As they crested a rise in the late afternoon, Silveridge came into view below them, a collection of wooden and brick buildings nestled in a valley between two mountain ranges. A church spire rose from one end of the main street, and the glint of metal rails indicated the town had rail service. "It's larger than I expected," Zara remarked. "Growing all the time," Wade replied. "Your uncle's store is one of the oldest establishments in town." "It's right on Main Street, can't miss it." They rode down into the town, attracting curious glances from the locals. Wade was clearly known to many, receiving nods of greeting as they passed. He guided them to a two-story building with James General Merchandise painted in faded letters across its wooden facade. "Here we are," Wade said, dismounting and coming to help Zara down. "Your new property, Miss James." The store was closed, a sign in the window explaining that it would remain so until further notice due to the proprietor's passing. Wade produced a key from his pocket. "The marshal gave me this to pass along to you. Figured you'd want to see the place right away." Inside, the store was dimly lit by the afternoon sun filtering through the front windows. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with an impressive array of goods from basic necessities like flour and sugar to tools, fabric, and even a small selection of books. A counter ran along one side with a cash register and ledger books neatly arranged. Uncle Henry was certainly organized, Zara observed, running her fingers along the counter's polished surface. He ran a tight ship, Wade agreed. The living quarters are upstairs. Would you like to see them? Zara nodded, and Wade led the way to a door at the back of the store that opened onto a staircase. The upper floor consisted of a cozy apartment, a sitting room with a small fireplace, a kitchen area, a bedroom, and a small study. Everything was clean but had the still, slightly musty air of a place that had been vacant for some time. Mrs. Holloway from the boarding house has been coming by to dust and air the place out once a week, Wade explained. She was friends with your uncle. Zara moved to the study, where a roll-top desk sat beneath a window overlooking the main street. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and framed maps of the territory hung between them. On the desk sat a framed photograph, a much younger Henry James standing beside a young girl with pigtails. "That's me," Zara said softly, picking up the frame. "I was about 8 when this was taken, during Uncle Henry's last visit east. He was proud of you," Wade said, standing in the doorway. "Used to tell anyone who'd listen about his niece, the scholar." Zara felt tears threatening and quickly set the photograph down. "I should have visited him. He invited me many times, but I was always too busy with my studies or too afraid of the journey." He understood. He told me once that some people are born to wander and others to put down roots. He knew you were finding your place in the world. They stood in silence for a moment before Wade cleared his throat. "I should see about accommodations for the night. The marshal will want to meet with the posse early tomorrow." "Of course," Zara said, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Thank you again for everything, Mr. Irwin." "Wade," he corrected her with a small smile. "After what we've been through, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Wade," she repeated, returning his smile. "And I'm Zara." He nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "The $silver serves a decent supper. I could come by around 6 if you'd like company." "I'd like that very much," Zara replied, perhaps too quickly. After Wade left, Zara explored the apartment more thoroughly. In the bedroom, she found a trunk containing some of her uncle's personal effects, photographs, letters, and a journal he had kept sporadically over the years. She sat on the edge of the bed, leafing through the journal, discovering snippets of the life he had built in this frontier town. A notation from the previous year caught her eye. "Wrote to Zara today about visiting next summer. Hope she'll finally make the journey. This town is changing, growing in ways that would surprise her. She could do well here if she wanted to stay." The words brought fresh tears to her eyes. Uncle Henry had wanted her to come west all along, not just to visit but perhaps to consider a life here. Now, looking around at what he had built, she wondered if perhaps there was a place for her in Silveridge after all. At 6 o'clock precisely, a knock came at the store's front door. Zara had changed into the fresh blouse Mrs. Porter had given her and done her best to arrange her hair with the limited tools available. When she opened the door, she found Wade standing there, also freshly changed, his hair still damp from what must have been a recent bath. "You look nice," he said, then immediately seemed embarrassed by the direct compliment. "Thank you," Zara replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "So do you." The $silver turned out to be a surprisingly respectable establishment, not the rowdy saloon Zara had half expected. A restaurant occupied the front portion, with the actual saloon separated by swinging doors at the rear. Several families were dining at the tables, and the proprietor, a stout woman named Mrs. O'Malley, greeted Wade warmly. "Mr. Irwin, we don't see you in town often enough." Her curious gaze fell on Zara. "And who's this lovely young lady?" "This is Miss Zara James, Henry's niece," Wade explained. "She's just arrived to take over the store." Mrs. O'Malley's expression softened. "Oh, my dear, I was so sorry to hear about Henry. He was a fixture in this town for so long." She patted Zara's hand. "You come to me if you need anything at all. Now, let me show you to a table." Over a hearty meal of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread, Wade and Zara found conversation flowing more easily than either might have expected. He told her about his journey west as a young man of 19, working cattle drives, before saving enough to stake his claim on what became the Double I Ranch. The land wasn't much when I started, just a run-down cabin and a few hundred acres of scrub. Took me 5 years to make it profitable, and I'm still building it up bit by bit. It's impressive what you've accomplished, Zara said sincerely. I know nothing about ranching, but even I can see you've built something special. Wade looked pleased by her assessment. What about you? What made you decide to become a teacher? I've always loved learning, Zara explained. After my parents died, books became my escape. Teaching seemed a natural extension of that love. She traced the rim of her water glass thoughtfully. But I'm beginning to think perhaps there are other paths I might explore. Such as running a general store, Wade suggested with a hint of a smile. Perhaps. It's certainly not what I had planned, but then again, very little about the past few days has gone according to plan. Their dinner was interrupted by the arrival of Marshal Bryce, who approached their table with an apologetic expression. Sorry to disturb your meal, folks, but I need a word with Irwin here. Wade excused himself and stepped aside with the marshal. Zara couldn't hear their conversation, but Wade's expression grew increasingly serious. When he returned to the table, his earlier relaxed demeanor had vanished. What is it? Zara asked, concerned. One of Jackson's men was caught trying to buy supplies in a settlement about 20 miles south, Wade explained in a low voice. The marshal persuaded him to talk. Seems Jackson is planning to leave the territory, heading for Mexico with whatever they've managed to steal. That's good news, isn't it? If they're leaving, Wade shook his head grimly. They need money for the journey. They're planning to rob the bank here in Silveridge tomorrow during the town's Founders' Day celebration, when everyone will be distracted by the festivities. Zara's eyes widened. But that's madness. There will be so many people around. Which is exactly why they think it will work. Jackson's desperate now. Men like that are at their most dangerous when cornered. Wade glanced toward the marshal, who was speaking with other men near the bar. We're changing plans. Instead of riding out to hunt them down, we'll set a trap here. That sounds dangerous, Zara said, unable to keep the worry from her voice. It is, Wade admitted, but less so than chasing them through terrain they know well. This way we control the battlefield. They finished their meal in subdued conversation, the light-hearted atmosphere of earlier replaced by the weight of tomorrow's confrontation. When Wade escorted Zara back to the store, they paused at the door. I should thank you properly for dinner, Zara said. No need, it was my pleasure. Wade hesitated, then added, I want you to stay inside tomorrow, away from the bank and the main celebrations. Jackson might recognize you as a witness. I understand, Zara assured him. Please be careful, Wade. These men have already killed so many people. I've faced worse odds, he said with a confidence that didn't entirely mask his concern. Get some rest. I'll come by when it's over. On impulse, Zara stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. For luck, she explained, feeling suddenly shy. Wade looked momentarily stunned, then a slow smile spread across his face. If that's luck, I reckon I'm the most fortunate man in the territory. With that, he touched the brim of his hat and turned to leave, his tall figure disappearing into the gathering darkness of the Silveridge night. Zara slept fitfully, her dreams filled with gunfire and bandits. She awoke early to the sounds of the town coming to life, wagons rattling down the street, voices calling greetings, the distant hammering as last-minute preparations for the Founders' Day celebration continued. From her window, she could see colorful bunting being strung between buildings and a bandstand being erected in the small town square. Under normal circumstances, it would have been a cheerful scene, but knowing what might transpire later cast a shadow over the festive preparations. She spent the morning organizing her uncle's papers, trying to distract herself from thoughts of Wade and the danger he would face. The ledgers showed the store was doing well, turning a steady profit without being extravagant. A separate account book detailed charitable contributions Henry had made to the town's school, church, and various families in need. You were a good man, Uncle Henry, Zara murmured, running her fingers over his precise handwriting. Around midday, a knock at the store door startled her from her accounting. When she answered, she found a young woman about her own age standing there, holding a covered basket. "Miss James, I'm Lucy Baker from the dress shop down the street. Mrs. O'Malley mentioned you'd arrived in town, and I thought you might appreciate some lunch, what with the store being closed and all." Zara was touched by the thoughtful gesture. "That's very kind of you, Miss Baker. Please come in." Lucy turned out to be a fountain of information about Silveridge and its inhabitants. As they shared the lunch she had brought, fried chicken, biscuits, and apple pie, she gave Zara what amounted to a complete social history of the town. "Your uncle was one of the most respected men in Silveridge," Lucy told her. "When my father's shop burned down 3 years ago, Mr. James extended credit to us without hesitation, said he knew we were good for it, and the town needed a proper dress shop." "That sounds like Uncle Henry," Zara said, smiling at this new glimpse of the man she had known mainly through letters. "Is it true what they're saying?" Lucy asked, lowering her voice. "About you and Wade Irwin," Zara nearly choked on her biscuit. "I beg your pardon," Lucy looked abashed. "I'm sorry, that was forward of me. It's just that people saw you dining with him last night, and well, Wade Irwin doesn't exactly court company. He's something of a local legend, but he keeps to himself mostly." "Mr. Irwin rescued me from a difficult situation," Zara explained carefully. "We're merely acquaintances." Lucy didn't look entirely convinced, but didn't press the issue. Instead, she moved on to gossip about the Founders' Day celebration, which would culminate in a dance that evening. "You should come. It would be a perfect opportunity to meet everyone in town." Zara hesitated, remembering Wade's warning to stay inside. "I'm not sure that would be wise. I've only just arrived and I have so much to organize here." "Nonsense. Everyone's eager to meet Henry's niece." Lucy's enthusiasm was hard to resist. "I have a lovely blue dress at the shop that would suit you perfectly. Consider it a welcome gift." Before Zara could formulate a polite refusal, Lucy was already making plans to return later with the dress. After she left, Zara found herself torn between honoring Wade's warning and the genuine desire to integrate into the community that had so clearly respected her uncle. As the afternoon wore on, the sounds of celebration grew louder: music from the bandstand, children's laughter, the general hum of a town enjoying a holiday. Zara's curiosity finally got the better of her. She decided a quick look from the upper window wouldn't violate the spirit of Wade's warning. From her vantage point, she could see much of Main Street, decorated festively with bunting and flags. People in their Sunday best strolled along the boardwalks, and children raced between them with the boundless energy of youth. The bank sat at the far end of the street, and Zara could make out several men positioned casually nearby, Marshall Bryce among them. She was fairly certain. Of Wade, there was no sign, but that didn't surprise her. If they were setting a trap, he would be positioned somewhere strategic, perhaps on one of the rooftops or in an alley with a clear view of the bank. True to her word, Lucy returned later with the promised dress, a confection of blue silk with delicate lace trim that must have cost more than a month of a teacher's salary. "I can't accept this," Zara protested. "It's far too valuable." "Consider it a loan, then," Lucy compromised. "The whole town will be at the dance tonight. It would be a shame for you to miss it." After Lucy left, Zara stood holding the beautiful dress, still undecided. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the room. Soon the dance would begin, and with it, potentially, Jackson's attempt on the bank. A movement in the street below caught her attention. 4 riders were approaching slowly from the south end of town, their manner casual but watchful. Even from a distance, Zara recognized the leader. The same cold blue eyes that had assessed her value in the canyon were now scanning the festivities with calculated interest. Her heart racing, Zara looked around frantically for any sign of Marshall Bryce or his deputies. They were nowhere to be seen from her window. The riders continued their advance, now close enough that she could see the bulges of weapons beneath their coats. Without stopping to think about the consequences, Zara grabbed her uncle's old shotgun from the wall where it hung and hurried downstairs. She had to warn anyone before Jackson and his men reached the bank. The street was crowded with townspeople moving toward the town square where the dance was being set up. Zara pushed through them, the shotgun held close to her side to avoid causing alarm. She had nearly reached the bank when she spotted Marshall Bryce emerging from the barbershop across the street. "Marshall," she called out, waving to get his attention. Bryce looked up, surprise and then alarm crossing his face as he recognized her. He started to move toward her, but a commotion from behind her drew both their attentions. Jackson and his men had abandoned their slow approach and were now galloping down the main street, guns drawn. People scattered, screaming in panic as the bandits fired warning shots into the air. "Everyone down," Bryce shouted, drawing his own weapon. Chaos erupted as townspeople dove for cover. Zara found herself pushed against the wall of the bank as the bandits thundered past. Jackson himself reined in his horse directly in front of the bank, jumping down with his gun trained on the entrance. "This is a holdup," he bellowed. "Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt." It was at that moment that Wade and the posse made their move. From positions concealed around the square, they emerged with weapons drawn. Wade's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Drop your weapons, Jackson, you're surrounded." For a fraction of a second, Jackson looked genuinely surprised. Then his expression hardened into something feral. Instead of surrendering, he grabbed the nearest person, a young woman who had been too slow to find cover, and held his gun to her head. "Back off, Irwin, or she dies," Jackson snarled. Zara recognized the hostage with horror. It was Lucy Baker, her face pale with terror. Wade didn't lower his rifle, but he didn't advance either. "Let her go, Jackson. This isn't going to end well for you either way. I'll be the judge of that," Jackson retorted. "Tell your men to drop their weapons, or I start shooting innocents." A tense standoff followed. Marshall Bryce and his deputies had taken positions around the square, but with Lucy's life at stake, no one dared make a move. Jackson's remaining men had dismounted and were using their horses as partial cover, their weapons trained on the posse. Zara, still pressed against the bank wall, realized she was effectively behind Jackson. The shotgun in her hands suddenly felt very heavy. She had never fired a gun at a person before, but Lucy's terrified eyes met hers over Jackson's shoulder, and Zara knew she couldn't stand by and do nothing. With trembling hands, she raised the shotgun and stepped forward. "Let her go, Jackson," Zara called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Jackson whirled, dragging Lucy with him, his eyes widening in recognition. "Well, if it isn't the girl from the canyon." "Came back to finish our business, did you?" "I said let her go," Zara repeated, the shotgun aimed squarely at his chest. "I may not be as good a shot as Mr. Irwin, but at this distance, I don't need to be." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Jackson's face as he assessed this new threat. It was all the distraction Wade needed. In one fluid motion, he shifted his aim and fired, the bullet striking Jackson's gun hand. The bandit howled in pain, his weapon clattering to the ground as he released Lucy, who stumbled away. In the next instant, the square erupted in gunfire. Zara dropped to the ground, the unfired shotgun still clutched in her hands. Through the chaos, she saw Wade advancing, his movements precise and controlled as he traded shots with one of Jackson's men. Marshall Bryce and his deputies engaged the other bandits, the exchange of gunfire deafeningly loud in the confined space of the town square. One by one, Jackson's men fell, either wounded or surrendering when they saw the odds turning against them. Jackson himself, clutching his bleeding hand, made a desperate dash for his horse. Wade cut him off, his rifle trained unwaveringly on the bandit leader. "It's over, Jackson," Wade said, his voice carrying in the sudden lull that had fallen over the square. "Surrender now, and you'll get a fair trial." For a moment, it seemed Jackson might comply. Then, with a movement almost too quick to follow, he reached for a hidden derringer with his uninjured hand. Wade's reaction was instantaneous, a single shot that found its mark with deadly accuracy. Jackson stumbled, a look of disbelief on his face, then collapsed onto the dusty street. In the aftermath, as the wounded were tended to and the dead were covered with blankets, Zara found herself sitting on the steps of the bank, still holding the unfired shotgun. Wade approached, his face grim but relieved as he saw she was unharmed. "I thought I told you to stay inside," he said, though there was no real reproach in his tone. "I saw them coming," Zara explained. "I had to warn someone." Wade gently took the shotgun from her hands and set it aside before sitting next to her on the steps. "That was brave, foolish but brave. Is it over?" she asked, looking at the activity around them. "Yes, all of Jackson's men are either dead or in custody," Wade sighed heavily. Not exactly how Founders Day was supposed to go. Despite the gravity of the situation, a small laugh escaped Zara. "No, I imagine not." The town slowly began to recover from the shock of the gunfight. The dead were removed, the wounded taken to the doctor's office, and the celebrations were officially postponed. As night fell, Zara found herself back in her uncle's apartment above the store, with Wade sitting across from her at the small kitchen table, a pot of coffee between them. "Lucy came by to thank you," Wade told her. "She said she'd return tomorrow to check on you." "I'm glad she's all right," Zara said sincerely. "It could have been so much worse." Wade nodded in agreement. "The whole town's talking about how you stood up to Jackson." "You've made quite an impression for someone who's only been here 2 days." "Not the kind of impression I was hoping to make," Zara admitted. "I came west expecting to sell a store and return home. Now I'm not sure what I want. What's changed?" Wade asked, his green eyes studying her with interest. Zara considered the question carefully. "Everything, I suppose. I've seen a different side of life out here. It's dangerous and unpredictable, yes, but there's also a sense of possibility, of building something meaningful, like teaching." Wade suggested, "This town could use someone with your education. Perhaps." Zara smiled at him over her coffee cup. "Or perhaps something else entirely." They talked late into the night, the horrors of the day gradually receding as they shared stories and discovered common ground despite their different backgrounds. Wade spoke of his dreams for his ranch breeding better cattle, expanding his land holdings, perhaps even experimenting with new crops suitable for the arid climate. Zara found herself drawn to his vision, to the passion with which he spoke of the future he was building. It was so different from the structured, predictable life she had imagined for herself back east. "It's getting late," Wade finally said, rising reluctantly. "I should let you get some rest." At the door, he paused, uncertainty crossing his features. "I'm riding back to the Double-I tomorrow." "There's a lot of work waiting after being away these past few days." "Of course," Zara said, trying to mask her disappointment. "You've already done more than enough for me." "That's not what I meant," Wade said quickly. "I was wondering." "That is, I'd be honored if you'd consider visiting the ranch again, when you've had time to settle in here and make your decisions about the store." Zara felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the coffee they'd shared. "I'd like that very much." "Good," Wade said, a relieved smile brightening his face. "That's good." He tipped his hat and turned to go, but Zara caught his arm. "Wade," when he turned back, she stood on tiptoe once more, but this time her kiss landed not on his cheek but squarely on his lips. It was brief but unmistakable in its intent. "That's not for luck," she clarified as she pulled away, her cheeks flushed. Wade looked momentarily stunned, then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "No, madam, I'd say that's something considerably better than luck." With that, he departed, leaving Zara standing in the doorway, her fingers touching her lips and a smile of her own forming. The weeks that followed were a time of transition and discovery for Zara. She reopened the store, learning the business day by day with the help of the clerk her uncle had employed, a meticulous older man named Silas who knew every item in inventory and every customer by name. To her surprise, she found she had a knack for commerce. The organizational skills that had served her well in her studies translated effectively to managing accounts and inventory. She introduced a few innovations, a lending library section using some of her uncle's books and her own collection that had arrived belatedly from Philadelphia, and a special order service for items not regularly stocked. The town embraced her warmly, partly due to their respect for her uncle and partly because of her actions during the attempted bank robbery. Lucy Baker became a close friend, introducing Zara to the social circles of Silveridge and helping her navigate the unwritten rules of frontier society. Through it all, Wade Irwin was a constant presence, though not always a physical one. His ranch kept him busy, but he made the journey into town at least once a week, ostensibly for supplies, but always finding time to call on Zara. Their courtship for that was what it had become. Though neither had formally acknowledged, it progressed with the measured pace of two people discovering not just each other, but themselves in relation to the other. They shared meals, attended church socials together, and occasionally rode out to explore the beautiful countryside surrounding Silveridge. During one such ride, about 2 months after the confrontation with Jackson's gang, Wade took Zara to a hilltop overlooking a valley where wildflowers painted the landscape in vibrant colors. "I've been thinking," Wade said as they sat side by side on a blanket he had brought, a picnic basket between them. "About the future." "What about it?" Zara asked, curious about his suddenly serious tone. "The double I is doing well. I've secured that breeding stock I wanted, and the spring calving was better than expected." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "But a ranch is more than just cattle and land. It's meant to be a home." Zara's heart quickened at the direction the conversation was taking, but she remained silent, allowing Wade to find his way. "I never thought much about having a family of my own," he continued. "The work was always enough, but lately I've been thinking that maybe it isn't." His green eyes met hers directly. "Because of you, Wade," Zara began, but he raised a hand gently. "Please let me finish. I'm not good with words like this." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Zara James. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you in that canyon, outnumbered but still fighting. I've never met anyone like you, someone who can be both strong and gentle, brave and thoughtful." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "This was my mother's. I've been carrying it around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." Inside the box was a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the sunlight and scattered it in rainbow fragments. "I'm not asking you to give up your store or your independence," Wade said earnestly. "I know you've built something of your own in Silveridge, just as I have at the Double I, but I'm asking if you might consider building something together." Tears blurred Zara's vision as she looked from the ring to the man offering it. In the months since her arrival in the territory, Wade Irwin had become the center of her world, his strength, his quiet humor, his unwavering integrity forming the foundation of feelings deeper than any she had known before. "Yes," she said simply, the word carrying all the certainty in her heart. Wade's face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he gathered her into his arms, his kiss expressing everything words could not. They were married a month later in the Silveridge church, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Lucy served as Zara's maid of honor, while Caleb stood as Wade's best man. Even Mrs. Porter made the journey from the Double I, her normally stern expression softened by obvious approval of the match. Judge Hollister, back in Silveridge for the regular circuit court session, performed the ceremony, his formal judicial manner giving way to genuine warmth as he pronounced them husband and wife. The celebration afterward was held in the town square, the same place where they had faced danger together, now transformed into a scene of joy. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by seemingly every household in Silveridge, and a band played while couples danced beneath lanterns strung between the buildings. "Mrs. Irwin," Wade said, leading Zara in a waltz, the name still new and wonderful to both of them. "How does it feel?" "Like coming home," Zara replied, and knew it was true. For all her education and aspirations, she had never felt as complete, as purposeful as she did in this moment, dancing with her husband under the stars of the Arizona sky. The question of where they would live had been resolved with practical compromise. They would divide their time between the Double I and the apartment above the store, with Sila's managing the business when Zara was at the ranch. Additionally, Zara had accepted a position teaching 3 days a week at the Silveridge school, fulfilling her original calling while embracing her new life. As the celebration continued around them, Wade led Zara away from the dancing to a quiet corner of the square. Happy? He asked, his arms encircling her waist. More than I ever imagined possible, she assured him, leaning into his embrace. Though I still can't quite believe how we found each other. I've been thinking about that, Wade said thoughtfully. What were the chances that I'd be riding near Dead Man's Canyon exactly when you needed help? That of all the places Jackson could have cornered you, it was somewhere I know like the back of my hand. Divine providence, Zara suggested with a smile. Maybe, Wade agreed. Or maybe some things are just meant to be, no matter how unlikely they seem. Looking up at him, at this man who had ridden fearlessly into danger to save a stranger and then captured her heart with his quiet strength and unwavering integrity, Zara couldn't help but believe he was right. Either way, she said, I'm grateful for whatever forces brought us together. Wade's response was to kiss her, there beneath the lantern light with the sounds of celebration surrounding them, a kiss that promised a lifetime of adventures yet to come. 5 years later, Zara stood on the porch of the expanded Double I Ranch house, watching as Wade taught their 4-year-old son, Henry, how to sit properly on his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter, Emma, played at her feet with carved wooden animals Wade had made during the long winter evenings. The ranch had prospered under their joint stewardship. Wade's innovative breeding programs had produced hardier cattle better suited to the arid climate, while Zara's business acumen had helped secure favorable contracts with buyers in California and beyond. The general store in Silveridge continued to thrive as well, now managed by Silas with occasional oversight from Zara. She still taught at the school 2 days a week, passing on her love of learning to the children of the territory, including her own. Life on the frontier remained challenging at times. Droughts, harsh winters, and the occasional rustler or troublemaker tested their resilience. But through it all, the bond between Zara and Wade only strengthened, forged in the fire of shared struggles and tempered by shared joys. As she watched Wade lift little Henry from the pony after his lesson, both of them laughing with delight at some shared joke, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The terrified young woman cornered by bandits in a canyon seemed like someone from another lifetime, a necessary chapter in her story, but just the beginning. Wade caught her gaze across the yard and smiled, that same smile that never failed to warm her heart. He hoisted Henry onto his shoulders and started toward the house, their son's excited chatter floating ahead of them on the clear autumn air. "Mama, did you see? I rode all by myself," Henry called out proudly. "I saw, sweetheart," Zara assured him. "You're becoming quite the cowboy, just like your father." "Not quite yet," Wade said with a wink as he climbed the porch steps, "but he's well on his way." As the family gathered on the porch, the sun setting in a spectacular display of color beyond the distant mountains, Zara felt a profound sense of contentment. This was home not just the ranch or the town, but wherever Wade and their children were. From unexpected beginnings in a canyon ambush to the rich tapestry of life they had woven together, theirs was a love story written in the wild landscapes of the frontier, a testament to courage, chance, and the enduring power of finding one's true partner in life's journey.